Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I was going to do this whole podcast standing up and glaring at the camera until I realized that I'd have to change my whole setup, and it just wasn't worth it. So instead...
But David, would you have worn a shirt like that too?
Oh, absolutely. I believe it. There you go. Too bad it wasn't enlarged, like the picture of him there. But I really think when he was doing that, everyone just wanted to say,
"Shut up, David."
Now with me, of course, you've already heard her voice. With me, of course, is my co-host, who would never got fun betrayal against me, Jessica Lewis.
I would never got fun betrayal against you ever. But I am so happy that you started with the stand-up because I have so many things to say about it. I really do. Because here's the thing. Oh, there's the stand-up. What I don't think that Survivor watchers are aware of is just how strict Jeff Probst really is when it comes to certain components of this game, right? And I can only use my season as an example, but there were plenty of tribal councils where Jeff got rather upset and might have yelled a little bit at some people on the jury for doing things that they shouldn't have done. For example, somebody didn't write someone's name out entirely. And he then reminded everybody in a very stern fashion, this is a game for $1 million and you're not, excuse me, I'm effing with my game for $1 million. So you need to be you need to write people's names out. And then he also got very upset when there was a couple of people who were they were loudly commenting on what was going on. And then he scolded all of us for that because we are not supposed to be offering our opinions during anything that's happening in tribal council. So I just thought it was fascinating that he was allowed to stand and maybe he was scolded later. I don't know. But Jeff has made it very clear, at least on my season, that the jury is there to watch. They are not there to comment. They are not there to provide their opinions. And the players are not supposed to be receiving information from the jury. That being said, I will also add that at my first tribal council, I found out that my husband was in Fiji and they did not allow me to see him, even though he was there, because I was the person. I got rocked out when they had the loved ones visit. And so he was actually on the same island I was on, and they wouldn't let me see him. I got very upset. And I not only stood up, I left tribal council. And Jeff Probst let me. He was like, no, let her go. That's fine. And I waited until they were voting, but I was like, I just can't do this anymore. So I walked out. I did come back. So I think in that moment, Jeff felt bad for me. And so he understood why I was upset and why I left. So it is a very interesting thing because you're not supposed to do that.
Well, David clearly heard that you had stood up and you were the one who provoked him into this. It is all your fault.
It's all my fault. But I was reminded of that moment when I saw this happening because at first I was like, oh my God, he can't be doing that. And then I was like, Jessica, you walked out of tribal council. You remember that, right? I was stunned, but I was also reminded that no, I did something even more aggressive. I actually left. So that's my 2 cents on just that portion of the game that people don't necessarily know about when it comes to what the jury is supposed to be doing and not doing. But also, it was silly. I just personally feel like it was a very silly thing for him to do.
It was cringe.
Yes.
I made a video on it. I've gotten the whole gamut of comments from some people defending him, which it's okay. And but the best was Star behind him trying not to bust out laughing, and Chrissy sharing looks with her.
Yes.
And then of course you had Shaheen and Camilla also trying not to laugh when he was doing
Yes.
it. So
Yeah.
he thought he was doing something so serious and
Mhm.
showing his honor or some BS like that. And it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, it was very, very unnecessary. Like, I can understand if you want to support someone when they're being voted out, like, that's
Mhm.
fine. But let that moment be about her leaving the game as opposed to about you trying to, like,
Yeah.
provide some message to her when she's not even in the headspace to even know that you're doing it, 'cause
Well,
she didn't
yeah.
even know that he had done it.
That's the funniest part is she had
Yeah.
no clue.
Yeah.
She had no clue. She heard about it afterwards and didn't see it until it. And then she even said she busted out laughing,
Yeah.
seeing it. So it was just,
Mhm. It's one of those things that, like, listen, tribal council there's a lot of rules that go into it and a lot of things that there are no rules about it, and you kind of make it up as you go. But the jury is there for a very particular reason, and it is not about the jury until it is about the jury, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that every player tries very hard to get a read on the jury. That's why everybody stares at the jury. That's why everybody looks at the jury, because they're trying to figure out who's going to vote for me if I'm in the final three, and who seems to be supporting me, who's smiling at me, who looks happy to see me. That's constantly going through everyone's mind when they're sitting there. But to do something like that was just very odd. It's just really odd. I really don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
that about does it. So, of course, like you said, the jury has rules. And you know who else has rules? We do.
we do.
Yeah. So we will look at Mary's game in a little bit, the same way we do every week by comparing how she played to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since using all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. And the newest published version of the rules can be found at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, where you can click on the link bubble for the Survivor rules. Now, before we address how Mary did in terms of, again, those rules, we always have some other things to discuss. And I, I want to start by following up on one part of the discussion we had last week.
Is that I was right? Is that what we're gonna be talking about?
No, I don't remember you being right. I'm sorry.
I do believe I said Mary was going to be.
Okay.
I feel like you always remind everybody at the beginning when you're right. So let's take a moment to appreciate the fact that I was finally right about
Sure.
something.
I was right that Eva didn't use her safety without power.
Fair. But yeah, I at least was correct in my prediction.
You were.
I'll take it, even though it was sad.
But the part I was thinking of, I know it's hard to believe that's not what I was thinking of, but what was where we all talked about how bad the editing has been this season.
Yes.
And once again, for this episode, I just have to say it was terrible. Now, we will save our discussion about what the players themselves may be thinking for Appendix A. But I think a major problem with the way many fans are reacting is because producers seem to be dedicated to the idea of making it a surprise above all else.
Yeah.
No matter what else happens, they have to make it a surprise.
Yeah.
And that means they don't show everything the players are doing. They don't show the schemes the players are involved in, because that would give away that the players do indeed have other schemes and plans. And
they're plotting, maybe.
Yes. So there are fans out there who are yelling, they're not playing the game. Yes, they're playing the game. We're just not being shown them playing the game. And if they had shown us more, I understand. We probably would have realized it was unlikely Mary would succeed. But they led us down this garden path of Joe so much that it made fans even more pissed off when it didn't happen. Because all we saw was build up to Joe, build up to Joe, build up to Joe, build up to Mary.
Right. And it was also like, I can't sit next to Joe. I can't sit next to Joe either. We should
Right.
we should plot and try to get him out. And it was
Yeah.
constantly,
And
yeah,
then they
Joe, Joe, Joe.
again, we talked about this last week. Like Chappelle said, they just leave out the conversations that they don't want.
Yes.
And, I feel there is a way they can keep some suspense while also showing that the players aren't just sitting on their thumbs.
Sure.
And Mary herself said in most of the interviews that everybody was making the move they thought was best for them. But the producers just don't seem interested in showing any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if we're lucky, they'll see the fan reaction and change their ways at least a little in the future. But I don't really believe that. I'm kidding myself probably because, we discussed last week, this is by no means the first time it's happened.
Yeah. And I also felt a very weird vibe with this particular episode. It felt very finale to me, where it was a lot of, well, I probably more like 3 people were really getting a lot of time to talk about their journey and playing this game and what it's done for them and their existence and how much they've changed. And I was like, what is going on right now?
I mean,
Like,
honestly, I think they were filling time.
which is
Because
terrible. Like, fill it with, like, I don't know, strategy talk.
Well, but that's it. They decided they don't want to show the strategy talk. And so therefore, they're going to show other things. And normally, I like to see that extra stuff, but not in place of strategy and not when you're purposely sending everybody off in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's funny because I made a video already of Joe messing up the challenge, like I mentioned in introducing you. And the funniest comment I got so far on my YouTube video of it was someone named Lucy Hannah saying "got fun betrayal" was the one thing this episode in fact did not have. But again, that part we'll get to in Appendix A. However, to also follow up on something we discussed last week, we finally found the answer to a question we were trying to dig into. What is Joe's kryptonite? The answer is spelling.
It's just that one spelling mistake. Betrayal was a little bit off.
A little.
I couldn't remember how he spelled it when I actually tried to post about it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to just spell it right because I don't remember what letter.
And then I immediately corrected you.
Of course you did. Because this is
incorrected
what our
you.
relationship exists of, right?
Yeah, I guess I incorrected you. Uncorrected you. I don't know what I did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, but it was really quite funny. I saw someone post about the fact that they thought it was great that Jeff was like, Joe, read it. What do you have? You know, it was very much like I'm gonna make him say this out loud.
But he didn't even. Jeff couldn't even tell what he had because it was gibberish on the reverse side.
Well, right, but he should have known that if it was gibberish on the reverse side, then it wasn't right on the front.
Well, right,
but, yeah. And I was weirdly reminded with this particular challenge of you remember the U and the S?
Oh yes.
Oh, I'm still upset for Chrissy about that. I'm still upset for Chrissy because I was like, that damn S was wrong.
Oh.
Like, if you're gonna say the U was wrong, the S was wrong too. But Chrissy,
well, that's why they had
50,
lines
so.
under it now for the facing the players.
Yeah, but it wasn't even the letter. It was the little symbol.
Oh, that got him. Yes.
Yeah,
It was the wrong color.
yeah. So I do really feel for her on that still because I was like, gosh, that's just one letter. But again, they have rules. Survivor has rules, and so I understand.
Yep.
But it was actually impressive though that Jeff caught it so quickly and was like, wait, nope, never mind. You lose, she wins, and then. But yeah, that was great.
Yeah. And they should all, thank Kyle for yelling out the word multiple times.
That is something else to think about, future Survivor players. Don't tell people.
Well, he had to. I mean, Jeff was making him. What's the word? But
then it was wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. And then he couldn't figure out why it was wrong. It is.
Well, he couldn't figure out why because you're not allowed to go around to the other side to look.
I know. That's weird to me that you're limited in that way.
So,
But
yeah.
it was a good time though.
Yeah. So I do have a couple other things from the game itself, also which involve Joe. First, we had him promoting the idea that I love so much. Going to the end with the toughest competitors to show that you really beat them.
That's what he would tell his kids to do.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Well, as I've said many, many times before, including just 2 weeks ago when you weren't here, this is a terrible viewpoint. If you beat someone now, or you beat them at the end, or you beat them in the first week, you still beat them.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, just to clarify this, because some people didn't get it when I was posting this, it makes sense for Joe to promote this because he benefits most.
Sure.
So it's just that nobody should listen to him. It would be like Jerry Seinfeld playing Survivor and saying, you know what? You need to take the funniest opponent to the end to prove that you can beat them.
I wouldn't have gone with Jerry Seinfeld on that one.
Yeah, he's well known. He had a show for like 7, 8 years. He's pretty funny.
Yeah, a
Most
show
people
about
think he's
nothing.
pretty funny. Well, yeah.
I mean, I didn't say he's not funny, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gone with Jerry.
Okay. Well, who would you have gone with? So
Oh,
I'm going to put you on the
goodness.
spot now since
You
said
are going to
that.
put me on the spot.
See?
Gosh, yeah, I know. The problem is I'm terrible with names. Jeff Gaffigan or Jim Gaffigan. See, I'm terrible with names. Jim Gaffigan's hysterical.
Okay. There's also the RHAP tie-in because Rob and Akiva did a whole thing rewatching Jerry Seinfeld show. So that's
I can support it. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, but the point is, anyone who is pushing their own, you should take the.
Well, and that's what we've talked about so many times. It's that like the truth becomes like reality kind of. If you are putting that narrative out into the universe and that's what you are telling people that this is what the game should be about. And we've actually talked about Joe doing just this, where he's putting that idea into everyone's head that we are going to play a loyal game. And this is going to be a season of actual, like, we're not going to backstab and we're going to be loyal and we're going to support people and strong people all the way to the end. And so that then becomes the mantra and that becomes the thing. And so, yeah, Joe has become very good at creating the world in which is best for Joe.
Yeah.
And everyone else is just like buying it.
I just don't. The thing is the either worst or best part of it, depending on how you look at it, is he's not even trying. It's not a game move.
It's him. That's who he is.
Which is what's annoying about like him saying you should take the strongest opponent. It benefits him. He should be saying it, but he's not even saying it because of the game. He's saying it because, unless this has been hidden from us too, and he's a master manipulator we don't know about, which I do not think he is, that he's saying it because he believes it.
Yeah. And I think he truly does. And I think that's why he and David connected so well, because I feel like they both shared that philosophy. And I do think though that it's troubling for someone like Camilla, who's talking about how she's shocked that she won immunity because, like, look at the people she's playing against. And this isn't Camilla's world. Camilla's not part of that. She's a strategist and she's someone who wants to like scheme and plot and play the game. And so I do feel like there are certain components that have been lost this season just because of that narrative that's taken over and has caused players to not play the way that they necessarily want to play.
Yes. Or if they are, we aren't being shown it.
Right. Completely.
Because it's the narrative of the season,
Yeah.
So now, and the other thing with Joe that I wanted to mention, and this goes into, it's related to, is he really a mastermind? No, don't think so. Is that he's had a rather easy path to this point. And this was something that Lindsay and I talked about with David, because, Lindsay brought up, well, he was, David was perfectly fine for all those episodes. And I was like, yeah, because he wasn't in any danger. And Joe has had this for even longer. So for him to preach taking the hard path, that's rather amusing,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and to compound that, we saw him lose his mind a bit this episode because Mary publicly said she was voting for him.
Mm,
And, first Joe told us he had to just stay calm, and then he turned around and wasn't calm because he flat out told Kyle and Mitch that, well, I have to write someone else's name in case Mary has an idol. And Mitch is looking at him like, well, whose name are you going to write?
right. Right.
Uh, and so when for some reason they didn't react positively to him, he couldn't believe nobody had any empathy for him.
Yeah,
He
love
ca-
that Shaheen was like, twice.
Yeah.
Hi, twice. My name's been written down. So like, welcome to the game. This is what happens. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can
And I was
I ask you something though about this?
sure.
Do you think that that was a good idea for Mary to announce that out loud, or would she have
Yes.
been better to not? You think so? Okay, because
Yes.
I've kind of been going back and forth a little bit about it.
In part, and normally I'd say wait for the rules, but I didn't plan on talking about this in the rules, so I don't know if you did. I think it was a good idea because, and she even mentioned this in at least some of her interviews, it tells the other players, if you want to make a move
Yes.
on Joe,
Mm-hmm.
you don't
Right.
even have to talk to me. I
And
know
that
you
makes
don't
sense.
want to talk to me because
Okay, and I could see that.
so you don't even have to talk to me. I'm voting for Joe. Plus it made Joe freak out, which is always a good thing for
Right.
other people to see.
I guess the other point or the counterpoint to that I was thinking, because that makes sense that no one was talking to her, even though she had already told everybody, I would like
Mhm.
to vote Joe out. Even if they weren't agreeing with her, she's solidifying, like, I'm still voting for Joe. But there was one comment that Shaheen made to her that I thought was interesting, because he was like, well, if we're going to do that, it would have to be a blind side. Like, they
Right.
cannot know that this is
Well,
happening.
that's yes.
Otherwise, it's game over. And so when I rewatched it and I heard that, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because now you are kind of putting everyone on notice that there's a potential plan in place to have Joe get voted out, which then also calls into question about the idol. Like, does then Eva give it to Joe and then he
Mhm.
plays an idol? And so I didn't know if maybe that was like I can understand the idea, the concept of I just want everyone to know this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you want everyone to feel comfortable and it has to be a blind side, then that might not have been the best idea.
Yeah. I just, I think it was more everybody else had to blindside him,
Right.
not necessarily her.
Right. But I just feel like, because then we saw what happened, right? Joe all of a
Right.
sudden is like, oh my gosh,
Freaking out.
like this. Yes, he's starting to be nervous, and he's thinking
Mhm.
about, maybe I need to put someone else's name down. And whereas, we also heard Camilla talking about how she wants to keep Joe and Eva very comfortable. So I just thought it was an interesting kind of thought process.
Yeah, I was like, when he said that, I was like, Joe, did you expect anyone to have empathy with you when you were telling
Right.
them you were going to write down one of their names? Like, what exactly was going through your head?
Yeah.
And I don't know. And I think part of it is he's never been in danger.
Right.
And suddenly someone says it, and I mean, he by no means did he spin out the way David did, but
Mm-hmm.
um, and Shaheen had to explain to him, if you write down someone else's name, you're telling them they're on the outs.
Yeah.
That could break the whole alliance. And Joe, I mean, eventually the way the vote went, I guess he probably understood, but it took a while, and it just emphasized to me that he was a bit out of touch with the actual game.
Yes, and I do feel like that is a very valid point, because Joe hasn't had to play the game. He just hasn't had to. It's
Yeah.
been very easy for him up to this point. And so now he is like, welcome to the game.
Yeah,
Because this is
exactly.
what happens. It's very scary
Yeah.
when your name is being seen over and over and over again, and you manage to squeak by one vote. Trust me, it's not fun. And you have to put a lot of faith into other people when that happens. So yeah, I mean, if he's really sold on his strong core alliance, then he should have been like, this is fine, who
Yeah.
cares? go ahead and vote for me. No one's playing with her. It's not a big deal. But yes, we did at least, he felt it a little bit.
Yes,
So.
yes. All right. Well, do you have anything or anyone else you want to discuss before we get to the rules?
I do not.
All right. Well, there are a few other things that, were worthy of making videos on. So I have already posted some, and we'll post more on YouTube Shorts, where I'm at David Bloomberg TV. But before we get to how Mary did, we want to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter and much more colorful version
Yes, they
in
do.
poster form.
Beautiful. Very
So
pretty.
go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Click on the poster, order it, or keep scrolling down, click on the shirt and order it, or the checklist t-shirt and order that. I say but really you can do it all.
Get it all.
You're adults.
Everything.
Most of you who are listening to this are adults. You can do
You
it.
have adult money.
That's right.
You can make your own choices.
Yes.
Order this stuff. It's great.
So again, that's robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. All right. Well, Mary had a rough go in the early stages of the game and only made it as far as she did thanks to an earlier successful shot in the dark play. Because of that difficult start and other obstacles that followed, she said in her interviews that she didn't really think there was anything else she could do to stay in the game. It certainly seemed that way by the time we got to these last couple episodes. But is it entirely accurate? Or were there indeed actions she could have taken, or not taken, to change this outcome? At RHAP, we know Survivor, and we know why Mary lost. Of course, the most important rule is the first one, which says to scheme and plot. In her pregame interview, Mary said, "Out here, the name of the game is deception." And recall, way back at the beginning of the season, when she got into a debate with Say in Tribal Council, because she wanted Say to admit that you have to be dishonest in this game. Which does make it funny to me that she ended up sort of in the Honesty Loyalty Alliance, because at the time she told Say, "You're going to win a dishonest game by being honest? That feels dishonest to me. It feels more honest to me that I'm saying I'm going to play this game dishonestly."
That sounds like a tongue twister.
It is, kind of. But, like I said, then she ended up in the Honesty Alliance. But, okay, you got to do what you got to do. Mary understood that.
Right.
The problem wasn't in her understanding, though. It was in her actions. Or rather, the action she could and couldn't take. As we saw, and as she told Mike Bloom, from the first tribal council, I was on the outs. And she was, but let's go back in time to remember why it was like that. In the Why Stephanie Lost podcast, I said, we saw Say talking to Stephanie and Mary, and those two just weren't giving Say what she was looking for. So she went to the guys before Kevin even got back from his supply challenge, and they locked in a majority. Boom, done. That is how quickly it can happen. So Mary made a decision to pair up with Stephanie very early, and it immediately bit her in the butt. She did also have that alliance with Kevin, but Kevin had his own issues that caused him to get voted out. So, yes, she was on the outs from the get-go, but part of that was her own doing, even if it's traced back to just a few moments after the game began.
Yeah, but I also feel like it's a very tough spot to be in, and I've kvetched about this before, and I don't mean to do so again, but when you do only have a group of 6,
right,
it does make it very difficult for you to necessarily have a choice and to take time to kind of process, because the majority can happen so quickly because it doesn't take that many people for a majority. And, if you have a group of 10 and 4 people lock in, well, that's only 4 out of 10, right? But when you have 6, then you're really in a tough spot. And so I do.
But that's why you have to do it, and you can't
I know.
mess around like she and Stephanie did.
Right. And that is, but I also, yes, I think that Say's game pace was so quick and so
Yes.
fast, and Say was not going to beat around the bush about anything. And it was like, you're either with me or you're not. And that was it. And so unfortunately, I don't think that Mary even necessarily had the time to figure that part out either. That like, oh, Say is moving fast, and I don't want to move that fast right now. But you have to move fast because things do happen so quickly in Survivor. So it is unfortunate that everyone she kind of picked to work with, she has the butterfly effect apparently on people who are playing
Yes.
the game with her, because then they get voted out.
Yes, I don't remember if I left this in here somewhere, but yes, I this episode I started calling her Typhoid Mary because everyone who got close to her
Oh my
died.
God, that's
Yeah.
terrible. That's really bad. Oh, goodness.
So, and she was, she really was Typhoid Mary for a while because they were dropping like flies and she was going right ahead, but
Yeah.
eventually it caught up to her.
Yeah.
Now, Mary did have a much better position on her swap tribe, and she even had a solid alliance there. It's funny the
Mhm.
way she talked about it in interviews because, of course, most of the interviewers asked her about David's comments that she was clingy and forced her way into the alliance
Mhm.
by hanging around all the time. But she pushed back and said, no, that's not the case. She told Mike Bloom, for example, from the first day of New Logie, David, Eva, and I collectively agreed that we would be working together. We were collectively hyped to work together because it was mutually beneficial.
I wish we had maybe seen some of that.
Yes. And she noted that they were the first people since day 5 who wanted to work with her. And they also didn't show that she and Eva had a relationship as well
Yeah.
for a while, till it went south when they voted out David, of course. Still, at the time, she was good. And she told Rob that despite what people said about, David wanting to bring her into the strong group, she says she was in from day one.
Yeah, and I am very curious about that whole construct because Mary did seem very adamant that no, that's not the way it went down. So
Right.
I'm curious of what we're going to hear from Eva in that regard, because this again is a problem with the editing, right? When we
Mm-hmm.
aren't being given all of the pieces, because the relationship between David and Mary kind of just came out of nowhere. All of a sudden they were like thick as thieves and they were with each other and they were a very strong duo, like and you were like, wait, what just happened? And
Yeah.
it would have been really nice if we had been given some insight as to how that developed, because I do think it probably would have helped provide guidance for where Mary ended up now and all of the issues with Eva and all. It's frustrating that we didn't get that piece, because I was reading this going, oh, really? They were? I never saw that, but okay.
I mean,
Like,
I suspect production was like, ooh, it's a better story if it looks like this,
mm, yeah.
you know. And I do think, and we'll get to this in rule 2. I do think it played into what some of the other players thought as well.
Oh, sure.
Now, with all of this in mind, what Mary said, and all due respect to Mary, for what she went through in the beginning of the game, this all belies what Mary said about being on the bottom the whole time and always worrying about the next day. Because, for example, she told Gordon Holmes she was never controlling things because she was always reacting to things. She also noted she never had a long-term vision because she was so used to being on the bottom that she just thought about how to make it to the next day. But she said in various interviews that she was the one who wanted to vote out Cedric in the split tribal council, and she agreed to pretend she was still with him so he wouldn't play his shot in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
So she did have some control.
Yeah.
She did have a vision of a game plan, and it was one without Cedric in it, so that she even said on the show she wanted to have stronger alliances moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
leading up to that, she was in the solid alliance and knew she'd be fine in the swap tribe, even if they lost a challenge, which of course they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said she was in the strong 6, which she also believed was safe. So I understand what she said about the early part of the game being bad for her, but she did have time to kind of calm things down and think things through in her mid game.
But I also think part of that is the other players who are part of that 6, because it didn't seem like the other players necessarily wanted Mary to be part of that group, but that was coming from David. And so that was even supporting this idea that Mary kind of came out of nowhere, where all of a sudden she was part of this group and it wasn't a group decision. And so I think that probably fed into her idea that, like, it doesn't even matter that, like, I'm in the 6 because I'm not in the 6 because they don't all want me in the 6. And
I
then
don't
once
think she knew that. I don't think she had any idea. She said she had a relationship with Eva, which we did see some of on there. We had to infer a lot of it. Like,
yeah,
like when Joe went and talked to Eva and was saying, "Well, I know you're close with Mary, but
yeah,
and even before that, in the swap tribe, she had perfectly calm times during the swap tribe.
sure.
She never
Well,
had to
right.
worry."
Well, but I also think that it does. I'm sure that it was frustrating for her just because, like, she didn't know about the David vote. And so I think that that's probably supporting this idea that I really wasn't part of this group and I really was on the bottom because they didn't tell me about the David vote. And you just end up kind of seeing the same thing happening. Like, every person that she got close to would then get voted out.
Yeah.
And, that became her story and what she was responding to, as opposed to, oh, this whole group of people are, like, really involving me in the decision here. And it sounds like Cedric was really the only vote that she was kind of leading the charge with that group, but that was also to their benefit as well.
Right. And I mean, I understand what you're saying. Retroactively almost. She's saying, "Oh, well, I was on the bottom the whole time." But the way she presented it in interviews, like, she didn't even have time to think. She didn't have time to strategize. She was always
Mm,
worried about the next day because she was never in a good spot. But she was in a good spot. And
mm.
my
Oh,
point,
yeah, I mean, once she was with David,
yeah.
it seemed like she was.
And maybe if she had used that time to plan things out, she wouldn't have ended up in the bad spot again.
Mm,
And so I'll have more thoughts about that later. But of course, her game then took a very negative turn when David was blindsided, and yeah, she was on the bottom again. So at that point, I would agree with her. There wasn't anything she could do from a scheming and plotting standpoint. She pled her
mm,
case. She tried to get people to switch to her way of thinking, but right or wrong, they had their own plans, and they were not going to change it all up for her.
yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So that takes us to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And we have an interesting situation here with Mary because, as I was just saying, she said she was in a position where she couldn't do much scheming, but I think she definitely could have during a good chunk of the game. And that same time frame is when her problems showed up in this rule. Because first, of course, she was in an obvious duo with David. Now,
Mhm.
I know it's a little silly to say that, or it sounds a little silly, because it doesn't seem to be a problem for other players in the season to
No,
be in
it's
a duo.
really not at
But,
all.
newsflash, lots of people are hypocrites in this game. And people saw how she and David worked in lockstep. And maybe worse was the idea that she was puppeteering David.
Yeah.
And, this was something we joked about as viewers. I know I joked about it,
Mm,
and other people did. But the thing was, the other players believed it as well.
yeah. Oh, well,
Joe,
Joe made sure to tell
right?
her.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
laid it all out after David was gone.
Mhm.
Now, she told Dalton Ross, "I did not intentionally manipulate David. Sorry to disappoint the fans. David did not need to be manipulated. He liked me and trusted me." But the thing is, whether she purposely did it or not, they appeared to be working so tightly together that they spoke as one voice. We have talked about it on previous podcasts, like when David said, "Oh, I'll take a back seat for this discussion on the next vote." "Oh, but Mary has these concerns." And then she just picked
Yeah.
it up right there.
Mhm.
They were so totally solid, and it was obvious to all.
Yes. Which again is fascinating because why that bothered anyone? It's like, well, pot meet kettle.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
it's crazy.
So, during this same time frame, Mary did more than just getting into a solid alliance. She strongly defended that alliance.
Yeah.
And as I said on a previous podcast, she seemed to really be feeling her oats as she spoke out too much, both somewhat privately within the Strong Six and then publicly in tribal council. Within the alliance, even Joe told Kyle he didn't know why Mary was pushing Camilla so hard. And that caught up to both her and David. When, for example, we heard Shaheen later say those two were in trouble because they pushed too hard too soon.
Yeah, and I do think that that's an interesting point about both Mary and David, is that if they had taken a different approach, then I do think that they would have found themselves in a really great place, because you've got David working with Joe and Eva, and Mary apparently had a relationship with Eva that we didn't really know about. So there is a world in which that could have definitely worked for them, considering who they were playing the game with.
Yes.
But it's the approach that I think each duo is necessarily taking. I mean, even Camilla and Kyle, nobody knows that they are, because
Right.
they're so under the radar and super secret. But I feel like Joe and Eva, while they're very much in everyone's face, it's also just a different presentation.
Yes,
And it's coming
J-
across differently.
right. It's Joe is a much more of a chill vibe than David
Yes.
ever was.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
David got very frustrated when anyone would necessarily have an opinion about something
yes.
and push back and not necessarily welcome a discussion. And then Mary would feed into that as well. And so I think that that probably turned people off
Right.
from the idea of wanting to work with the two of them, because then they turned it into, well, now they're being paranoid. When
Right.
in actuality, they were right about what they were saying. But
Well, they weren't right about what they were saying. They were, close to
they weren't
right, but
completely wrong.
they weren't completely
either.
wrong, but they kind of they were accidentally right.
Yes.
But yeah, we know what happened next. David was blindsided, and as Star told Mary, your boat sank when David left. She was in a situation where she would have needed to rely upon other players who she had just been actively working against.
Yeah.
And an amusing part to me was that in her pregame interview, Mary said she didn't want other players to see how strategic she could be, and instead they would think that she's chaotic and loud.
Oh.
Yes, she at least partially succeeded in that, because once again, we had someone outside the core alliance being called chaotic and untrustworthy.
Right.
Now, Eva told Camilla she felt that way about Mary. Mitch said he didn't trust her. Camilla said she didn't trust her. Heck, Camilla told us nobody trusted her and she'd burned everyone. And of course, it didn't help that Mary tried to shift the target to Kyle last week, because she was certain the Strong Alliance wouldn't go to rocks for Kyle, despite her saying in interviews that she and David were on the same page about Kyle and Camilla being close. So if you believe that, why would you propose that to Camilla?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, the whole thing, again, just pieces don't quite fit in. She had opportunities, but instead of using those opportunities, she did other things that made it worse.
Yes, I can agree. The chaotic thing, maybe that's really what it was.
It's like we discussed last week. Everybody is chaotic if you're not going along with the plan.
Oh, right. And that's something, I'm glad that you said that, because I do think that it's very interesting that if you are trying to no, that's not a good thing for me, right? Like, that's not a good thing for my game. And then they're like, oh, this person is so chaotic and unpredictable. Well, wait, no, they're just, they're fighting for their own life in the game. And then that's suddenly chaotic and unpredictable. And you can't trust that person and can't play with them.
Yeah, I also think it's a situation where like a certain word catches on with like a group of people.
Yeah.
And so I think the word chaotic got planted in there early. And so then
Mm-hmm.
everybody was chaotic, and
Yeah.
it was...
I know next week Mitch will be chaotic, and they'll be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
That crazy Mitch. All right, well, we can move to the third rule, which tells players to be flexible. How do you think Mary did here?
Well, I actually feel like she did well, because she kind of had to, right? If you are constantly losing who you are working with, You have to keep figuring out how to stay in the game. And perseverance, she was really working on, right? She was trying to figure out ways that she could find her footing and could work with people, which is why the David thing was so like, in my humble opinion, unexpected. And oh my gosh, and also Mary's part of this power alliance, if you will. But so I think overall she did well with the flexibility component and knowing she needed to keep shifting and moving. But it was then what she was doing after the fact that wasn't necessarily beneficial because she wasn't using it to the best like possible thing that she could have used it, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I think overall she was very willing to switch things up, do things that were different, be chaotic if she needed to be, if that's what it was going to take, cause some problems, create a little chaos, a little animosity if she needed to. So I think overall she did well here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think in Mary's mind, she was as flexible as she could be because she, talked in interviews about needing to figure out how to move from one day to the next. And in some ways, she was like, the things you talked about and then spearheading the vote against Cedric,
Mm-hmm.
and she did move forward. But the one thing that just stops me from, saying, yes, she followed this rule completely is it seemed like she got too locked into the strong six. If
Yeah.
if you look at that group, many of them have somewhat overlapping alliances both within it and outside. And yes, Mary and David did have Star on the outside, which, by the way, another huge hypocrite alert from David. When David left, me and Lindsay talked about how he was trying to form a relationship and this was hypocritical. But now we find out they were talking final three.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, David. How can you talk final three? That would be dishonest and disloyal. How dare you?
I guess it depends on who your audience is.
Yes. And wait, David's calling in for to respond.
He's
Um
the strong silent type.
Yes.
He just stands up.
And well, I suspect the jury was told you're not allowed to say anything, and he was like, "Okay, I'm following the rules. I'm not saying anything."
I know, which again, I
Yeah.
want to know what Jeff Probst did
Yeah.
afterwards. Like, I want to know if he yelled at David
Yeah.
because I feel like he would have.
Yeah, well, we'll probably never know.
So
But
curious.
I mean, the way Mary acted after, David was, well, both while David was there and after, ended up pushing away the people that she thought she had on the inside. So like
Right.
she said, she had Eva, except the way she and David acted helped push Eva away. The way,
But I'm going to jump in here for just a minute
Yeah.
because I feel like Mary and David thought they were like the cool kids and they were running the show. And so in their minds, I don't think they thought that what they were doing was negatively affecting the relationships they had with people. And so in her mind, she's locked in because she's like, this guy, we're going to the end and I'm going to beat this guy because I'm basically the puppeteer, if you will, but he's going to win all of the challenges and he's going to keep me fat and happy because he's going to feed me when he brings me all the reward challenges and it's going to be so great. I'm going to win because I'm going to be with David. So I can kind of understand her wanting to be like really locked in because look at Joe and Eva. Like Joe is so locked into Eva. He's like, I'll lose the game for her.
well, he is so locked in, but everybody considers Joe their number one. Like Kyle doesn't say number one, but Kyle feels really close to Joe. Shaheen feels really close to Joe. David felt really close to Joe until he screwed that up. And, it's like you said, they didn't think that they were doing anything wrong. Yeah,
right.
They didn't.
Right.
But they didn't think, period. They did not realize that what they were doing is not something they should have been doing.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And,
that makes sense.
So by doing that, Mary cut off her own flexibility and ended up on an island on the island.
Yeah. Sorry, Mary.
So the fourth rule, which we can go to now, tells players not to let their emotions control them. Now, I know the first instinct by many here would be to say, well, that obviously happened to Mary, especially in this episode, because we saw her get mad at Eva and take out her frustrations on a coconut and so on. And
And she broke the fourth wall when she did it.
yes,
That was fun. I
she
did it.
broke a lot of coconuts too.
I know, and I kind of loved all of that. I'm just gonna say.
Oh, me too. And we'll talk about how she handled the Eva thing in a moment, but overall, I don't think it was a problem because by the time she was openly expressing those emotions, she was already a goner, and
Yeah.
she knew it. I know the show made it seem like there was a possibility that people might work with her, but it's pretty clear from the outcome in her interviews that she was already a strategic pariah, and everybody knew she was done for.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting that the all of the shots that they were cutting to other people while
Mhm.
she was doing that. And I'm like, really? Were they all just sitting there while she was doing that
Yeah.
and saying those things? I don't think so. I feel like that was not what was actually happening. But editing,
Editing, yes.
it's a
Now,
magical thing.
yes. The other question is whether she voted or made decisions emotionally. And I think she was fine there as well. While we had plenty to say about her strategic decisions already, they were indeed strategic. Right or wrong, they were made for strategic reasons.
Yes, but she did also want to stick it to Cedric, which is why she wanted to push to because of everything that had happened in Vula. So there was a little bit of a I'm going to get back at you there. Not entirely emotional, but there was she was pretty clear that
Yeah.
I did that because I wanted to stick it to Cedric.
I mean, that's true. I also think it was the best strategic move for her at that
Oh,
point.
and I mean there's certainly and it I think helped her further along obviously because she was solidifying herself in this group and she was actively engaged in determining who was going to be voted out. So, but yeah, there was also a bit of a gotcha there
Yes,
as well.
yes. All right, well, the fifth rule reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Jessica, Mary said on the show that her social game was pretty freaking bomb, but it wasn't hitting with this group of people. Why was that?
Because there's this whole loyalty thing happening. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's a really
What?
big topic
What?
of discussion.
This is this
you
is
haven't seen that?
this is shocking news.
Loyalty, honesty, integrity, but yes, we are, but we're really not. It depends on who you are and how we're going to be with you. So, no, I do think that yeah, I mean, I feel like Mary had a good social game, but I think the other part of Mary, it's like who's the recipient of the conversation she's having. And Mary was always very blunt, I think, in a lot of her approaches that she took with people. We saw this with Say. We saw this with people on the Swap tribe. We saw this when she became close with David. And then all of a sudden she was part of the Six. She was not going to back down. She wasn't demure, and she was very much vocal about what she thought and what she wanted. So I wouldn't say that, socially her game was problematic, but she wasn't necessarily vibing with the people the way that she needed to. She vibed with David incredibly well.
Right.
He was happily willing to receive Mary's suggestions and how she wanted to play the game because it was to his benefit as well. But then, Mary appeared to be pushy or then chaotic because of the way that she was acting. So I just think that it was an interesting dynamic that she brought to the island, and I think she attempted, but she also said no one wanted to talk with her. So it's kind of a mix depending on what we believe and what we don't believe, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the main problem was that other people were following the fourth rule when it came to her. They weren't necessarily doing so with each other, but they didn't have those early relationships with her.
Yeah.
And she talked in interviews how they all had tight bonds from day one in some cases, and she had nobody like that. I mean, they were all gone.
Right.
And back when it appeared that she was pushing or being pushed into the strong six, I think it was Lindsay subbing for you here who talked about how it was like a bunch of friends who hung out together. And then suddenly there was this new girlfriend brought in by one of the guys.
Yes. That's exactly what it's like.
And the guys are like, wait, just because she's your friend doesn't mean she's our friend. And okay, let's make it clear. Mary was not David's girlfriend. That was a
No.
very weird scene when they showed Kyle, in confessional. I still don't know why they included that, but she was the new add-on to the group.
Yes.
And they already had their relationships. And then once David was gone, it was like there was a breakup, and the people who she thought she'd made friendships with cut her off. They're like, "Oh, no, you were his friend.
Yeah,
You
you're
were
not our
never
friend.
really our friends."
Yes. Yeah, I think that's perfect. And kind of frustrating for Mary.
Yeah, well,
But yeah.
and then, like I said in, previously, once she was on the outs, she just had it.
Yeah.
Early in the episode, we saw her, chopping open the last coconut, and which turned out not to be the last.
Not to
coconut,
be the last coconut. Oh, can I tell you something else about coconuts on the island?
You've told us before, and I think about it frequently. The
I will remind
magically
everyone.
appearing
They
coconuts.
do. That and bamboo magically disappear because there's no bamboo trees or anything. I'm just like, it's like the bamboo like that just shows up like randomly. All of a sudden there's bamboo and coconuts. It's amazing. The coconut fairy will come by and you're like, oh look, all of these coconuts. Thank you so much. So yes, they have a funny way of just kind of being there when you need them. It's weird.
It is weird, yeah. But I guess it was the last coconut they had on hand,
Sure.
and she was chopping it, and then told off Eva when Eva challenged her on why she was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we also saw Camilla saying it was hurting her game, and nobody wanted to work with someone who had bad coconut etiquette. Now, first of all, huge props to Camilla for the banana etiquette shout out. The many years ago banana etiquette shout out. That's something you and I appreciate greatly.
Yes, very much.
But Camilla, come on. Was that really a factor? Let's be serious here. That had nothing to do with it. This was a chicken and egg situation. If Mary thought that she had a chance in hell, she wouldn't have acted that way.
Yeah.
But
And she even said that in her interview. She's
Yeah.
like, I knew I was done. So I
Right.
was like, whatever. I'm just going to be brutally honest now.
Yeah. And, she knew, like she told Eva, she hadn't eaten. She wasn't going on any rewards, etc. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, she said it in her interviews. And she said, I reverted to my real life self, which is incredibly blunt. And I'm very happy that I did it because, listen, it's not very often that you get to say what you really feel to people's faces. And you know what? I'm happy she did it too because I found it highly amusing.
It was highly amusing when she was explaining to Eva why it was like, well, you're going to go on a reward anyway.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be eating. It's fine. I did actually see there was quite a few TikToks created about this, and one gentleman posted a TikTok.
But there's only one place people should look for TikToks.
And that is fair. And that's
Yes.
David Bloomberg, and that's it.
David
But
Bloomberg
you didn't
TV.
do this particular TikTok, but
No, maybe
someone
not.
was
Yeah,
like,
but okay.
Eva, while she was talking to Mary about eating the last coconut as he's like eating a piece of pizza. Like, how dare you? Like,
Yeah.
say food right now. And I was like, this is so funny because it's so true.
Right.
And Eva was also eating the coconut too. While she was complaining about Mary eating the coconut. But anyway.
She's going to run us out of coconuts. It's okay. You'll get.
Give me another
food.
piece.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, the sixth rule warns against being too much of a threat. And when Mary was voted out, she made a comment in her final words about being seen as a threat. And I pretty much discounted the idea right away. However.
Oh, I was going to say there better be a however here.
It came back up again in her interviews.
Okay.
As she said, other players told her after the game that, they thought she was a threat to win if she got to final tribal council. And I have to admit, I was still skeptical after seeing that in the first interview I read. But after reading it again and again and again, even though she was just, repeating the same story as many people do in these interviews, I thought about it, and it did actually make some sense from an inside the game viewpoint.
Yes.
Because she was the last surviving member of Vula.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They don't know how she did that. They just knew she was successful.
Right.
And they did know she led the charge against Cedric. Plus, as we mentioned, they believed she was manipulating David and turned him into a puppet for her own evil schemes.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw Joe talking about how smart she was.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's something to be said about, not that she had an underdog story, but she definitely came with a much different background and
yes.
narrative than someone like Joe. If Joe is
Mhm.
sitting there, he's had kind of an easy road to get to where he's at. And so she would have the ability to say a lot of things that, Joe wouldn't be able to say. I mean, she went to a lot of tribal councils. She successfully played her shot in the dark. She had to kind of claw her way through things and figure out how to bob and weave, I guess, and figure out who I should become friends with and how I can integrate myself into this group. And so I do think that there would be a lot for her to argue, and no one on that jury would be mad at her. I feel like that would be a very big component because she wasn't part of this loyalty.
Right.
Even though she was part of that group, she wasn't selling this loyalty thing. And so if she turned her back on someone and voted someone out, she'd be like, what was I supposed to do? I'm on the bottom. I had to figure out how to survive. And
Right.
so I got rid of all of you. So no one's going to be mad at her for doing that. However, someone like a Kyle is going to run into a potential issue with this if he's sitting there after voting people out, right? If he does that, or, and so these are the things that I think are going to weigh very heavily on some of the players. It would not have been an issue for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they had that perception of her and they discussed it amongst themselves, which I'm sure they did, it would have crept into their thoughts and made them worried.
Mm.
And, I mean, here's the other thing too. We've talked about this. If you already have an idea of what you want to do, you can come up with all sorts of reasons. So if
sure.
you're already thinking, well, I want to get rid of Mary, then you could start thinking, oh, she also could really be good in front of the jury, and she could do all the things that I mentioned and you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So convincing yourself that Mary is a big threat helps.
Right.
To pile on to say, oh, well, I really can't work with Mary now because I would be going to my doom against her.
Sure. So I'll sit next to Joe instead.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Well, the
Genius
seventh rule.
plan.
Yes. The seventh rule covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. Of course, we know Mary saved herself with the shot in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't exactly rocket science to play it then, since she literally knew the votes were coming at her.
Right.
What she did correctly there was picking the right scroll.
Good for you, because some of us don't know how to do that, Mary.
Well, you picked the one different item just like she did.
If only I could have had, if it was the wrong one, that was the good one, like we saw with Eva, where she got to go on a reward or a challenge or whatever the hell it was, a journey, because she got the different rock. Anyway.
I mean, she did the Tyson strategy. She waited. She didn't pull hers until the end. She got what was left over. And she got,
I know.
She got the good one. And the same thing on the show Genius Game. The person I talked about who drew something, it was also the last one left over.
Yeah, go last. Will immediately was like, I'm picking last. And okay, I'll go first. No, bad idea. Bad idea. Anyway, sorry, this is not about me. It's about Mary. Mary, you did great picking the correct roll, scroll, whatever the hell it is, for your non-roll of a dice shot in the dark.
Yes. Now, beyond that, Mary did pull a bit of a fast one on Say early on by pretending to appear comfortable, so Say would think she found an idol, but it didn't end up, coming to anything. Nothing. The votes didn't change, at that moment.
Right.
And when she really needed to pretend to have an idol, which would have been here at the very end of her game, she didn't do it. Right. And, she put a bit of fear into Joe, like we discussed, but she didn't take any other real action in that regard.
Yeah, and I think now with the way that idols look, it's pretty easy to fake one if you really need to. So, yeah, I feel like that would have been a good moment for her to try to do something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we get to Appendix A, the long-awaited Appendix A.
Here we are.
Discusses players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. We talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. Now, we are still in the phase of voting out weak players, a.k.a. those who are outside the majority alliance. Of course, there were a lot of discussion shown about
Mhm.
the possibility of switching to get rid of a strong player in Joe, but nobody pulled the trigger. And I know another week of this caused plenty of frustration for a lot of viewers,
Mhm. Yeah.
but that's not why we're here. We need to look at it from the point of view of the players themselves. And I think it all comes down to something Kyle said. And I think this is the reason we were shown it, even though it wasn't enough. And we already talked about the editing, the bad editing earlier. Kyle said, everything in Survivor is about timing. You see players who make big moves all the time and they're booted out right after that. You see some players who never make a move and regret it for the rest of their lives. And he told us also that in every minute of downtime he has, he thinks about when the best time is to take out Joe. And Camilla added to it, saying she and Kyle know they need to turn on Joe. It's just a matter of when. And that's always the key. They know. For all the people out there who are commenting on my videos and everything else saying they're never going to turn on Joe, they know that they need to turn on Joe. But when? If you move too soon, you become the target. You get rid of your shield, and then all the arrows come firing at you instead.
Mm-hmm.
If you move too late, well, then it's too late, and the person you wanted out ends up marching to the end to win. There's a big risk either way. I mean, there's a difference in television. You know, the viewers want to see stuff happening, and so they want him to move quickly. And then, Kyle knocked out Joe this week, and he's gone next week. Well, at least it was exciting. Yeah, but not for Kyle, it wasn't. And, you know, and so Kyle said, we've seen examples of both ways failing in multiple past seasons. We could sit here and list, here's where it worked the wrong way. Here's where it worked the wrong way, you know, and it seems to many viewers, and as I was watching it, it seemed that way to me too. It seems like this was the time, but we don't know other things that they might know or be thinking, thanks in part to the editing, and also because we can't read minds.
Right. I will say though, the biggest issue that I fear right now, and this is why I feel like perhaps like this would have been the moment because he didn't win immunity.
Yes. And that's
the problem.
But the thing is, if you do it now and you're Kyle, I think one thing you're thinking, and again, I don't know, you know, none of us know because of the terrible editing. But I suspect what they're thinking is he didn't win immunity here. He's not invincible.
Well, sure.
We can get him. And they also know that as you get towards the end, there are more puzzles involved. Joe got fun betrayal. Joe is not a puzzle king.
But he still almost won this one.
After Kyle told him what the word was.
Well, right. But still, I mean, but that's the thing, though, about these challenges is you never know what it's going to be.
True.
You don't know how it's going to resolve itself. And some of these challenges towards the end can be incredibly like the maze ones, and they have to like the rope ones. Yes, very physical. And you have someone like Joe's going to fly through that. Like, that's no big deal. So I just feel like it's one of those situations where if everyone, which it sounds like, and again, editing, this is what we're being told, literally every single person except Eva said, I cannot sit next to Joe.
Well, we'll get to this in a minute, but Shaheen didn't say that either. And
no,
so now,
Shaheen was talking about taking Joe out.
He was, but he was talking to other people. Like he was talking to Mary about it.
No, he was in one of his confessionals.
He was, but he also said, you know, that he felt
he thinks he played a better game than
Joe.
Yeah,
and
he does think that he can argue that he played a better game than Joe.
I think that's the issue. Let me finish this and then I'll get to Shaheen separately here. But I do want to go back to your season. Now, unfortunately, you were already on the jury at this point, but over and over again, players were mad that Others weren't taking out David. Why aren't you taking
Mhm.
out David? David's going to
Mhm.
win if he gets to the end.
Mhm.
And I think for viewers, it was still entertaining. So people were not as
Right.
mad. But certainly certain players on your season were mad.
Oh, yes.
At least one of them left, was voted out yelling,
Yes.
congratulations, David, you've won, or words to that
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
but meanwhile, Adam knew, and he confirmed this in interviews. He confirmed this on our podcast. He had to bide his time till the right moment.
Mm.
And I think this is what Kyle is doing here. Now, will it work the same way? I don't know. We'll know in 2 weeks. But
Mm.
I at least understand why he's putting so much thought into it. He doesn't want to be a Jesse.
And I get it. Like, and I understand the struggle, but I am a very big proponent of there is something to be said about acknowledging why you put someone on the jury. If you are sitting in one of those final 3 seats
Mhm.
and the jury is angry that you voted me out, then my God, tell Joe he is Superman. He is that shining
Yes.
star. I could not, Joe. I knew if you were sitting next to me, I'm losing to you every single day. Like I'm not beating you. And so I had to do this for my own game. And my gosh, Joe, you should understand you're playing for your family. I'm playing for my family. You know, I mean, like there are things that you can try to do to placate, to make the person on the jury be like, well, he told me I would have won. Look at me. And so is it going to win you the game? I don't know. But at the same time, if you don't get there, then you don't have a shot of even making the argument. And I can understand where Kyle is coming from because he doesn't want to lose jury votes because these people he has been loyal with and loyal to. So I can completely understand that. But at the same time, if everyone is recognizing that Joe is going to win if he's sitting in the I mean, people have said this. Like
Right.
he's got the great story. He's the fireman. He's he's just this likable guy with these eyes and the smile, and you can't help but love him. Then no one is going to begrudge anyone for not wanting to sit next to him. And so I feel like there is a very good place that someone sitting there could make this argument that yes, I wanted to play loyal. Yes, you and I have a connection and there's a personal thing here, but I had to take you out because you were going to beat me.
Oh, I agree with all that. But the problem is you can't make that case until Joe is on the jury, or else you end up with a Rachel and Sam situation like we saw
Well,
last season.
sure. Yes. Yeah.
Because if you make it ahead of time, well, first of all, Joe knows you're coming for him.
Right.
But and that's why I think they're just, it's just this tightrope. I don't want to be Jesse, but I also don't want to be Laurel.
Right.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah. Yeah.
and so they have to look at the game that's in front of them and what they know, and
Mhm.
try to determine, okay, what is the best place for me? Now, Kyle has the added benefit. You said you have to get there in order to have a chance at winning.
Mhm.
Worst case scenario, Kyle knows he's going to Final Four no matter what.
Mhm.
So I think it's less of a pressing issue for him.
Right.
Now, it should still be a pressing issue, but I think he has a good chance of getting there either way.
Sure.
Um, and then there's also another potential wrench in the works this time that I think, even though we didn't really see them talking about, we saw a little bit. We saw Shaheen and Mary talking about, you mentioned it earlier, that Eva could have still used her safety without power and her idol this week. And I do think that played into it. Were they worried that she would
I
play
thought
those?
safety without power was only
It was till
is
this
it
episode. It
it
was
was
till this.
7.
Yes.
Okay, it was 7. Okay. Mhm.
And so if they had tried to make a move and word got out at all, then Eva takes off. Joe is safe. They're revealed. And whoever told them flips. And now they're on the outs. And so that was the problem, I think. And that goes back to the conversation you were talking about of Shaheen and Mary. If Shaheen and Mary had this plan, it would have been beneficial for Kyle and Camilla to rat those two out, to get in good with better with Joe and Eva. If Kyle and Camilla had this plan and Shaheen found out, or Mary, it would have been better to rat those two out so that
I know, but I feel like there's so much like just like bending over for like Joe and Eva instead of the other people going, you know what? Like, no, like we're not going to let them walk into a final three. We're going to take them out when we have a chance. And I get it. I understand the concern about the idol and the concern about safety without power. Like I get all of that. I really do. But I also just feel like if you know that Mary is so angry and you know she's voting for Joe, and everyone is kind of playing with this idea in their head, if you can keep a secret, it could have happened. It could have pulled it off. They could have done it without.
But it's not just you keep a secret, it's you have to trust everybody else to keep a secret.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And so, I mean, I still think we're in a position, and I admit that I'm looking ahead at the previews a little bit for this. I think Kyle and Camilla still worry about Shaheen.
Yeah.
I don't think they trust him.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, he did go and talk to Eva. We did see that as well. And I think, too, that there is this. And again, we saw it with Shaheen, where he thinks that he's played a better game than Joe. And so if you have someone in your alliance who has this idea of what their game looks like and how they think other people will perceive it, it can become very difficult to try to convince that person to do something different.
Exactly.
Because in their mind, they're like, but I'm fine. I'm going to beat him anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
There's that too.
And even if you just think you have other chances, like, we've still got final 6 and final 5 to do what we want, then, we'll get rid of this advantage. We won't have to worry about that. So it's just the idol.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just that. And yes, like you brought up earlier, there is the Shaheen apparently believing he can beat Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And he told us, everyone's enamored of Joe, and listed all the things you listed. And Shaheen thinks he's played a better game. As he said to Mary, there is no outloyaled. And from a purely strategic gameplay view, okay, I can see it. You may be seen as right. Mary told Gordon Holmes if the vote were held at that minute and she had to choose between Shaheen and Joe, she would vote for Shaheen because she's not voting according to whether she likes you, but whether she respected your gameplay, and Shaheen had that.
Right.
But Mary isn't the only juror.
Yeah.
And the others may have a different view. So right now, from what I'm seeing, if I were on that jury and you purposely bring Joe, the acknowledged biggest threat, to the end, I am saying you're a dummy. I'm voting for him.
Yeah.
You never should have brought him. There's no way.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, again, it goes back to the Rachel and Sam thing. You can't just say someone's a big threat and then bring them to the end. And, Shaheen hasn't been saying it publicly like the way we saw it last season, at least as far as we know, but it could still easily be used against him that way. Now, with that said, I've strayed a little bit from the point at hand, which is it's not about what would actually happen, but what Shaheen believes would happen. And if he thinks he can beat Joe, then he has no reason to turn on Joe. You want to go to the end with someone you believe you can beat.
Sure. And also, I just want to put this out here too, because I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, damn it, we're a strong alliance and we're just going to stick together to the end. And I understand people don't like that. It's not exciting, the pagonging component of it, and they don't really love it. But if you can pull it off and you can make it work, then kudos to you, because you made it to the final 4, which that's where you want to get to. So you can hopefully make it to the final 3, because there's that whole fire component thing that we all love so much. But so yes, I can appreciate the fact that they want to get there, but I recognize the struggle for Kyle, because he's also thinking about Camilla in the process of all of this.
Right.
Which is an added issue.
Well, and ideally, you want to get there with people you think you can beat.
Yes.
And, not just, okay, let's all go to the end. No, it's let's all go to the end because I believe I can beat you. Shaheen seems to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be hard to get him to flip on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it all comes back to a few things. One, as I mentioned earlier, Mary said in pretty much all her interviews, everybody was making the decision they thought was best for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And as Camilla said on the show, Mary only had her own perceptions and didn't know what other plans may have been going on because she wasn't included in them. And so again, I just, I know a lot of people are complaining that this group isn't playing. And that simply isn't true. They're all playing. They may not be playing the way you, a particular viewer who, is listening to this, want them to play. And it goes back to something we often say. They aren't playing for our entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing for their own games. Whether
Right.
their plans work or not remains to be seen. If Joe wins the rest of the challenges and then the game, I'm sure everyone will look back to this moment with 20/20 hindsight and say they should have gotten rid of him.
Yeah.
But if Kyle plans his move for the right moment and triumphs in the game, we'll look back and say, see, he knew what he was doing the whole time.
Well, and I will say that at least Kyle and Camilla have had a plan kind of in place since the beginning, which is what really tends to give me pause in all of this.
Right.
Is that I do think that Camilla and Kyle are not looking at it like Shaheen, where Shaheen's like, well, I can beat Joe, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
I think Camilla and Kyle it has become such a component of this season of how under the radar their relationship is and how they can't believe that nobody has picked up on this and that they're doing such a good job acting that I do think that that's going to be kind of what wins the day, because they have really committed to this thing. And I think the fact that we saw Kyle sharing with Camilla that he's actually a lawyer and that he wanted to open himself up. I know, crazy, right? You lie about being a lawyer when you play Survivor. Who would do such a thing?
I have no idea. I don't know
It's
anyone who would.
crazy, right? But I think that was kind of a little nugget, like, no, look, like he is picking her and they are going to continuing doing what they've been doing and no one's going to necessarily know. So I'm very impressed with those two and I'm very intrigued to see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, no matter what the outcome is, like I said, the other players, they're trying to balance what they know with what they hope will work.
Yes.
And to me, it's like being in a poker tournament. You're trying to figure out, when do I go all in? You never know how the cards are going to turn out. You can only make what you believe is the best play given the information that you have.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see what happens.
Exactly. We'll see what happens. And then, we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, of course. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole thing that we do.
Yeah. Well, we could go to Appendix B, which deals with the jury phase. And I don't think there's too much to talk about here.
Wait, didn't someone stand up this week?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know what you're talking about there. But as we discussed in Rule 6, it may be true that the others thought Mary was too much of a threat to face in the end, but we already addressed that. Last week, we talked about how Joe and Eva tried and failed to jury manage Mary. So it'll be interesting to see if that ends up coming into play. I mean,
yes,
I do think Joe and Eva have lost 2 jury votes at least. They're not getting Mary and they're not getting David.
100% correct. Yeah.
And someone also wrote to me, I believe he goes by Damn Vanguard on Blue Sky, and said, what about the possibility of going to the end with Joe and Eva and them splitting the votes? And then therefore, you can take the rest of the votes and come out ahead.
Yeah.
And I do think that over the years, we've talked about vote splitting in the final 3 a lot, and it almost never happens.
Yeah.
I think that what tends to happen is people are like, well, We like those two, but of those two, we like that
We
one.
like
and
that one
therefore
better,
we're going to
right.
vote for
Yeah.
them. And I think
Mhm.
if Joe and Eva go, Joe wins.
Oh, I agree.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't think people give Eva the votes. I think Joe
Mhm.
has done more.
Mhm.
If Joe is not there, she could. You know, it's possible. But I think that if it's like Joe, Eva, and Shaheen's going to get whatever votes he gets. Joe's going to get the other votes.
Mhm.
Eva's going to
Mhm.
be a 0 vote finalist. I believe in that situation. And, you know, it's a question of trying to read it. You know,
Right.
maybe Shaheen figures, okay, if I'm at the final 3, I know that, you know, David's mad. I know Mary's mad. So that's 2 votes I've got.
Mm.
And maybe he thinks he has Kyle, Mitch, and Camilla too. Maybe he does believe he has it locked up,
Yeah, maybe.
you know? And so wouldn't we all be shocked if that ended up, you know, that would be the biggest surprise that the editors pulled on us.
Sure.
But yeah, we'll have to see. It'll just be interesting to see how it all comes into play.
Yeah, for sure.
So, with that, it is about time to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts about Mary?
Oh, Mary. Mary, you were incredibly entertaining from start to finish. I was very intrigued with Mary with her initial like introduction to the world and her pregame press. I thought that there was something about Mary. And I was
I was waiting
very
for that.
curious. Yeah, I was very curious as to how she was going to connect and jive and really kind of fit in, because she does have, and she did have in her pregame press a presence about her and a she was very much like, I will tell you who I am and what I want to do. And we did see that. And unfortunately, it didn't work for her the way she wanted it to. Unfortunately, it worked exactly the opposite way she wanted it to. People didn't appreciate her being brutally honest. And then she got really brutally honest right before she was leaving, because she knew she was leaving. But I do think that one thing she recognized about herself is that she has a persistence about her. She talked about her persistence in her pregame press, and that she was believing that she could show persistently being loving and being kind, and that was going to help her in this game, and she wanted to recognize that in other people and push through with that persistence that she believed she had to kind of work with the individuals that she was playing the game with. And I think she did that to a certain extent. We saw that with David. She was able to find a piece with David that she then became persistent with. Unfortunately, that persistence became perceived as chaotic, and then chaotic became associated directly with Mary, and then no one wanted to play with Mary once they got David out of the equation. And so I do think that unfortunately Mary just didn't find the appropriate space to be with all of the people that she was playing this game with. She tried. She tried to utilize the skills that she came into the game with, but sometimes when you are playing this game, there are certain parts of yourself that you do have to set aside. And I don't know if Mary knew enough to set aside the parts of Mary that she needed to in order to really even fake a connection with some of these people just to get her a little bit farther in the game. So, but overall, she was certainly a great person to watch on the TV. And I think she tried to be persistent and tried to bring herself into this game, but she just couldn't find the connection she needed to get her to the end.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier that Mary said she didn't really think there was anything she could do to save herself. And she was right about that by the time we got to her final episode, and even the prior one. But there were things she could have done sooner. As we discussed, Mary said in her interviews that she was on the bottom the whole time. But that wasn't strictly true. There was a good chunk of the game where she had power. The problem was that whether she did it on purpose or without realizing it, she overused that power. That was the point when she should have been preparing for her future, for the inevitable breakup of the Strong Six alliance. But instead, she was defending that alliance with all her might, telling the others in tribal council that no one should take a shot at someone who might never take a shot at them. Despite the fact that 6 people certainly can't win the game.
Mm-hmm.
But the only real side alliance Mary had was Star. So when people turned on David, she had nowhere to go. They tried to get Camilla and Mitch on their side, but it's kind of hard to do that when you've just been working to vote those people out.
Yeah.
Mitch said it flat out. You can't make moves with people you don't trust. And I don't trust Mary or Star. Camilla added that nobody trusted her and she'd burned everyone, which was also true because even for those who were within the remnants of the strong alliance, most of them never really considered her a part of it and felt she had pushed her views too hard. So it's true that Mary had nobody left to work with, but it's not true that there was nothing she could have done about that. She just would have had to recognize it sooner and take actions then to prevent this result. And that is why Mary lost.
There we are.
Yes. All right. Well, before we get to our predictions for next episode, we want to let everyone know that Sam Phelan from last season will join us next week to be our final guest of the season.
It's going to be so exciting.
Yes, really looking forward to talking to my fellow former Chicago suburbanite about this season. I mean, there's so much going on with Chicago. The Pope is from Chicago. Sam is joining us. I'm more excited about Sam personally, but
my mother was very excited about the Pope. I'm just going to say she was messaging. She's like, "Did you see?" And I'm like, "Mom, I'm at work. I don't know what's happening. Like, what's going on in the world?"
It turned out he's a White Sox fan, not a Cubs fan, after a false alarm, But I did hear Sam was on a White Sox podcast or radio show, so maybe Sam's a White Sox fan too, and I just don't know it. But we'll still have him on.
We'll have to ask.
We definitely will. I almost asked ahead of time, but
I'm excited that Sam will be with us.
Yes.
That'll be great.
Also want to remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form and t-shirt form and checklist t-shirt form.
Yep.
Again, go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed and you can get all of your wall hanging and
Survivor
clothing
rule needs.
Yes.
And you can also, if you are so inclined, follow me on both Blue Sky and Twitter. I am at Jessica Lewis 89. I'm also on Instagram at Jessica Lewis 6789. But I must apologize. Most of my content is just really limited to Wednesdays at this point with Survivor. But that's okay because we love Survivor and we know Survivor, right? And that's why I do this every week with David Bloomberg, who is very much into the social media scene and has so many areas in which you can find the content that he creates. He has a link tree that allows you to find all of the places in which he exists. So David, please explain.
Yes, you can find me on Linktree/David Bloomberg, where, it lists all my different places that you can locate me. You can find me directly on Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. And I encourage all, Survivor players, former players, fans, viewers, come on over to Blue Sky. It's better there. As far as beyond the text side, the discussion side, I am posting at least 3, sometimes more reality TV short videos every day on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, where I am at David Bloomberg TV. Right now, they're almost all Survivor, but there are some from Genius Game, which is going on in the UK right now. And speaking of Genius Game, I mentioned earlier that I was on another podcast talking about this. I am co-hosting the Tradar podcast's coverage of that show. The show has switched from 2 episodes per week to 1. So it only airs on Wednesday nights. And because of that, because of our schedule for recording, that podcast is already available for episode 3. So you can just search for the Tradar, TRAIDAR, wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube and find out all my thoughts about that episode.
Lovely.
All right. Well, it is time for predictions. And since you got yours right, you get to go first. See, you should have reminded me about that part.
But I am so proud of myself because it never happened. True. So all Survivor players know that when I predict you, likelihood of you going home is slim to none. And the likelihood of you winning is also slim to none.
See,
however,
I had protected Mary all this time because I kept predicting.
I know. And then you stopped, and then all of
I
a sudden
stopped, and she was gone.
I got involved. And it was all bad. It was all downhill for you, Mary. I'm so
Yes.
sorry. So here's what I want to do. I want to have fun because I want to
all want.
believe. I know.
I mean, that's what me and Chappelle did last time. We made the fun predictions, and then you made the right prediction.
Look at me. I'm like, they're not going to do anything yet. I want to believe that they're going to. And I want to believe, I know that you've often said that, like, if we see it in the preview, it's a red herring, and like they're just distracting us, and that's not actually what's going to happen. But the numbers are obviously dwindling. We're getting down there, right? And the last thing you want at 6 is any possibility of a tie, because going to rocks sucks. I'm just going to say that. So
I don't know why you would say that. That is such a weird opinion to have.
it's so weird to have, right? That I just don't like rocks. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. It's a
So
good thing you're not a geologist.
I really want to believe that Eva and Joe are not going to necessarily be the targets, but I do love the idea of Camilla and Kyle. Like, they've already started planting the Shaheen seeds, right? They did this before. We saw it. It had to have been included for a reason, because there has to be something about that that's going to matter. And I want to feel like this is why we didn't get what we all thought we were going to get this week, where they were all going to flip on Joe, because Kyle, how much Kyle content did we see in this past episode to show where he was struggling?
Yes.
And how much of an emotional, like, issue this was, and he just wasn't there, but then strategically and emotionally couldn't handle it. There's got to be a reason why we're seeing all of this. And I feel like whatever decision Camilla and Kyle are going to make, it is going to be based upon the acting that they've been doing, the little seeds they've been planting, and all of these things. And they know that Eva and Joe cannot be the target, because they need to use them, because they saw Joe's paranoia, right? They saw what happened as soon as Joe heard his name being dropped. And they saw how he responded. So I love this idea that they're going to throw Shaheen under the bus, even though I think Shaheen's great. I think they're going to throw him under the bus, and Joe's going to get frustrated and angry and paranoid, and he's going to have Eva come along. And now you've got Eva, Joe, Kyle, and Camilla. And that's all you need in order to then vote out a Shaheen. So I'm going to pick Shaheen.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll have to wait till the end to see if I go the fun route like you did or the non-fun route.
Ooh, there's a lot. Okay.
So a lot of it you've already mentioned, quite honestly. We
Okay.
saw in the preview, Kyle tells Joe that Shaheen flipped. And Joe clearly is displeased with this, because Shaheen says something about, why are you acting like I bleeped in your pancakes, or something like that.
Yes.
It looks like Camilla and Kyle are up to something, and that something is indeed turning Joe and Eva against Shaheen. So, like you said, basically back to their plan from weeks ago. But we also saw Joe and Eva wonder if the story could be BS. However, what I wonder is what will come out of this, if anything. Because 6 is not a great number to turn against Joe and Eva. And I know what you're saying. Well, they're not turning against Joe and Eva. They're turning against Shaheen. And maybe that is it. That was one of my possibilities, that they're just trying to get, Joe to get rid of Shaheen. Another possibility is they're trying to get Shaheen mad at Joe by making Joe mad at Shaheen, so that Shaheen will join them and Mitch against the duo. That seems way overly complicated.
That is, yes.
To take a little bit of a tangent here, Rob said on Know-It-Alls, and then I think he also said it on the podcast with Jelinski, that he thinks Kyle and Camilla will take out Shaheen and then Mitch, and then go to 4 with Joe and Eva. And then Kyle and Camilla will end up in fire making. And that is a very tempting prediction to latch onto, because of the number of times we saw Kyle and Camilla, one of us has to be in final 3. One of us has to be in final 3. So if they're up against each other, then one of them will be in final 3.
Right. That's fair.
But circling back to the preview, you raised this. I am drawn back to Hubecky's Law.
Oh, of course you are.
Who was the one person who was not mentioned at all
Mitch.
in this preview? Exactly. So I think Kyle and Camilla are going to try to start all of this, and then it's all going to settle down, and it will come to naught. Either because Shaheen finally
going the
wins
not fun
immunity.
route.
Yes. And
well, that's true. Shaheen has been making such a big stink
Right.
about not winning immunity.
Yes.
That's a fair point.
I
I mean, stink. I understand Shaheen.
Right,
I wanted to
right.
win too. I
Yeah.
totally get it. Yeah.
And instead, yes, I think everyone's going to vote out Mitch. It's going to be another episode where people have their, pitchforks and torches out afterwards.
Oh, no.
And then Kyle and Camilla just hope that they can swing Shaheen next time at Final 5 against Joe and Eva.
Oh, gosh. Well, there we have it. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy upstairs.
Yeah.
So I was like, if you could hear it from where I'm sitting, you'd be a little concerned with what's going on upstairs in my house. But that's okay. It's fine. It's all good.
All right, so we've reversed roles. This time you're picking the fun route.
I am picking the fun route.
I am picking the less fun route.
I want to believe that it's going to be like a woohoo.
I want to believe it too, but fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. No, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And production just keeps fooling us.
Yeah, but you know what? It is what it is. So,
yes.
All right. So there we are. So, can I thank people, or what are we doing yet?
Well, you can, but first I want to tell people to check out the RHAP patron program.
Yes,
Rob has a
definitely.
website.com/patron. You can get access to all the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, plus Facebook groups and Discord. And of course, it helps support shows like ours and everything on the network. So again, go to robhasawebsite.com/patron.
That's
also
right.
Make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP Survivor podcasts by going to weknowsurvivor.com. You'll have your choice, like, hey, what podcast service do I use? Like, I use Downcast. So I could choose that, and I can choose, that I want to get the whole stream, or you can just click into individual podcasts and watch and listen to those. And so it's best if you just subscribe to the whole Survivor stream, because then you'll find all the content you want, from the know-it-alls to the B&B to us to Club Condo to Survivor Global, to all the old school interviews that Rob has been doing.
They've been so great. I love this.
I take issue with Rob's use of the word old school. There was old school, middle school, new era.
Yes.
Somehow old era got switched into old school. But he
I'm
redefined
still okay
it.
with it, Rob.
He redefined it and said, if you played for 39 days, you're old school. So there you, well, at least if you had the potential to play. If you only limited it to the people who played for 39 days, that would be a much smaller group. But
yes.
But so anyway, yes, there's all those things. So again, go to weknowsurvivor.com.
Yes. And we would like to thank everyone at RHAP for all of the incredible work that you do, not just for our podcast, but for all of the content that you just heard David Bloomberg discuss. Scott, Jess, Doug, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you to the entire team. It is always impressive to see how much content is put forth and put out there for people to listen to watch, to enjoy. So thank you for all of the incredible work. Also, thank you to Will from America for the theme song that was created for the audio version of the Why Blank Lost podcast. It is lovely, catchy, and we love it. Thank you. And David, this has been fun. It's just the two of us this week.
Yes.
It's a great time. Love it. It's been good. So thank you so much for this lovely week that we've had together. And next week, we will have a guest again. So
that's right. Next week, like we said, we will have Sam. And then for the finale, there's too much to discuss there to bring someone else on. So it'll just be us. Just us. But for now, Jessica, thank you. And I would like to honor you I will stand awkwardly. Well, I'll have David.
Please
the other
stand up.
David,
Yes, have David
stand
do it for
awkwardly.
you. Have
Because
the
if I
other
try to
David.
stand awkwardly, I will knock over everything that I have in my setup.
I mean, you got to appreciate the biceps, though. I mean, come on.
I mean, they're almost as good as mine. You just can't see them because they're, blocked.
But there is that one picture that you posted that one time.
Yeah, that was when, that was early David before he showed.
Early David.
Yeah.
We also need to say Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
Yes, absolutely. Before we leave, Happy Mother's Day to you. Happy Mother's Day to your mom.
Yes.
And
Mother's Day, Mom. She loves listening
all
to
the
us,
mothers
so.
out there. So,
yes.
All right. Well, we will see everyone in a week with Sam. And until then, you can reach us on social media. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.